In this video, we're going to be utilizing what we learned in the 3D painting video to actually paint something. So again, we're going to be painting it right inside Modo. We're not going to be using Photoshop. And what we're going to be painting is this guy right here. So again, we have like a cartoony version of this already modeled. That'd be this guy right here. Looks a little goofy. There we go. Lighting was a little bit weird. So this was an asset that's already been made. Here's kind of the finished product. Again, this is already has an unwrap, already has the paint on here, so you can kind of see what's expected from this one. This is the actual texture that was used. Go ahead and minimize that. So again, if we look at this, there's kind of a little bit of differences here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 candles, but we only see one candle right here. And that's because the UVs were stacked on top of each other. We're not going to worry about that in this one, but just so you can kind of know the correlation between the two. And there's a little bit of stacking going on in other places. So let's go ahead and look at this file. So if we look over here, all the red areas are going to be UVs that are stacked. So again, if I double click on this, it's going to be every candle shares the same candle. We're not going to be doing this for this one. We're going to actually give this a new unwrap. And the purpose behind this is just so you can kind of get some practice in unwrapping. So again, our unwrap probably won't be as optimized as this, but it should be fine to work on for your first texture paint. So the first thing I'm going to do, so you can kind of ignore this, the file that you open actually won't have an unwrap, so I'm just effectively getting rid of this unwrap, just kind of putting a messy one over here, and then we'll start unwrapping. So we've unwrapped a handful of things before, so let's just do what we've done before and just kind of do this one piece at a time. And let's say that our kind of unused area or incomplete area where things aren't unwrapped will be over here. This will be our working area, and then on the right side is where we're going to put all the finished stuff. So I can go ahead and put this little collection of unwrapped gobbledygook just over here right on the left side. So let's go ahead and just do one of these candles first. If I just look at this, again, I'm doing Shift H to just have selected the thing that I want, but again, all your hide show options are right in here. So if we look at this, let's have our wireframe on. This realistically can be looked at as just a cylinder. So what I'm going to do is actually just cut the top completely off of this. And then we need one little edge coming down. So 1, 2, 3, something like that. Left click, hover over the 3D viewport, right click, and my settings over here just so you can see. So we have it set. It was at angle base. I'm just going to switch it to this one, and again, you can toggle these back and forth and see what one you like better. This gap we don't need to worry about, and then these are those buttons that you can kind of just mess around with. So again, just comparing this one, it's like shrunk over here and it's kind of expanded and bigger over here. This one's a little bit more uniform. Same thing with this. Let's go with this one. It's about uniform on both sides. So that's going to kind of be how we unwrap these candles. So let's grab this candle, throw it over here in the quote-unquote done side. Unhide. Let's grab this candle. Let's just do that same thing. And again, this is going to be good practice for just selecting things, rotating around. Just the more you work in here, the easier it's going to be. So unhide. Let's go ahead, and can kind of get lost in which ones you unwrapped and which ones you didn't. So I can just select these, hide those, isolate this one. And we're just going to work our way through these. And again, at any time I can throw this checker pattern on, just hit enable, have my checker pattern I select, hit to small. If your version of Modo doesn't have this option, what you can actually do is, again, just go to Google Images, get a checker pattern, and drag and drop it right on your mesh. So I'm actually going to switch this to maybe one of these, maybe this large one. There we go. That should work. So now I can actually see which ones are unwrapped and which ones aren't. Should make this, oops, a little bit easier. So I meant to hit Shift H, and that would have isolated my selection, but I hit Shift J, and what that did was it froze everything. So if you ever see meshes in green, that means they're frozen, and you can't select them anymore. So the hotkey for that is just I, or under Edit is Unlock right here. So I don't necessarily have to hide these every time. If I don't have edges selected on other meshes, and I have access to select all the edges I want, it really shouldn't be a problem. And again, all this stuff is just stacked on top of each other, but it's not going to be really that big of a problem. This is starting to distort a little bit. I'm going to switch it to U and Y. Because again, these just kind of behind the scenes, they look at how things are oriented in 3D space. So you can see they started to get a little bit more and more warped as I was going around that object, and I was changing where I was at in 3D space. Realistically though, that shouldn't be a really big problem to have to go in and change those. You could probably leave it just at the current settings. So now I'm just double clicking in polygon mode on these pieces just to see, just explore this mesh and kind of see how it was built. Because again, I'm going to be unwrapping these like one piece at a time. So if I just double click in polygon mode, I'll see what piece that is, and then I can go in and start unwrapping it. Oh, so a little bit of a problem. So from here down to here, it's just getting a little bit of a pinch point. So I'm just going to cut right there as well. And then that alleviates it. Now we have this little round thing, and technically I could actually do this. So now I have a little circle. So I have like the bottom of it, the top of it right here, and then this piece that kind of acts like a cylinder. So I'll go ahead and speed up this process. I won't speed it up so fast that you can't follow along, but again, making this real time, it's kind of slow, so if you follow along, pause it when you need to, it'll probably save you some time. So at this point, that pretty much sums it up for the unwrap. Again, hopefully following along, I didn't speed it up too fast. But now we have a big nest of things that are unwrapped. We can definitely go through here and make sure that our checker patterns look okay. Everything should be fine though. So at this point, before we even start painting, we still need to pack all this stuff. So we can manually pack this, we can auto pack it. Let's see what auto pack does. Again, pack, stretch, orient. All these pieces get thrown into here. So again, for this assignment, an auto pack is going to be fine. But comparatively, we have this candle, so the top fits right here and the sides right here. This one is close, this one's far away. Ideally, in a normal, perfect scenario, you'd kind of want to have all the candles together, and then all the wood pieces together, and then all the stone pieces together. That just look a little bit better. It'd be easier to work on in Photoshop because you'd be using all your candle colors in one area and all your wood colors in another. But for this instance, we're just going to do this auto packing color. So now that our unwrap is kind of acceptable, we can go ahead and turn off this little guy. So that's just our checker pattern. And again, same thing, if you had a checker pattern texture applied, you could just come in here, find that texture, right click, and go to delete. So now what we need to do is add an image. So we don't have a texture for this at this point. So we can hit add clip, new image. Now this gives us some image options. We're going to do a PNG. Go ahead and name that, and we'll just save it on the desktop for now. And now it lets us pick the size. We'll do a 1024 by 1024. So again, all other settings were default. Now if we go to the Paint tab, we actually don't want to start painting yet. What we want to do is link up that texture we just created with the material that this has. So if I go to the shading tree, we have our Candelabra material. Again, if we didn't have that, we just select the polygons and create it. So from here, what I want to do is I want to add that texture that we created to this material. So to do that, we can just go to Add Layer, Image Map, Load Image, and then we're just going to grab that Candelabra paint image I made on the desktop, hit Open, and you'll see the two link up. So now when we go to that airbrush tool, resize it, again resizing it with a right click and drag left and right. We paint on our object and it fills in. So again, we can hit the undo button to undo some paint. So the other thing, if we wanted to, we could adjust our material settings, so material property, and change the smoothing angle. Again, it usually defaults to about 40. We could increase it something like this. You might want a little bit higher, so I just threw it at 120. So if I was going to paint this, what I would do would be I would isolate kind of the things that have like colors, get an airbrush, and again, I could bring up that reference, and I'd suggest that you kind of have that up when you're painting through this. Pick a brighter color. Opacity is at 80, so we'll just put that to 100. And then we can fill this in. So again, the fill brush is a little bit weird. Excuse me. It kind of fills it on the whole mesh. It doesn't work like you'd expect a fill brush to work, because again, Moto's not exactly a 2D editing software. So the painting tools, I mean, they're not bad, but they're not really the best in the industry. Another software you could check out if you're really interested in this would be something like 3D Coat. It's just a really, really good software for 3D painting. So something like that. So picking a different color. The metal parts of this were kind of a purple color, so we'll just do kind of desaturated purple, make it a little bit darker. Let's grab those pieces. think all of these were the purple color. So now instead of using the airbrush, we'll go ahead and use the paintbrush. Opacity is at 30. Pop that up to 100. And again, this will just be really easy to quickly go in and fill these colors. The other thing that you might be noticing, is as soon as I paint this, so let's unhide this guy right here, he's unpainted, and you can kind of see the shadows and stuff with what's going on with him. But this one, you actually don't see the shadows. That's because I have it on this mode over here. I have it set to texture. Let's change it to default. Now I can see all the shadows and lighting in the scene. But texture is going to make it to where you just see flat colors. So again, a little bit different style. But I usually toggle back and forth. A lot of times if I'm painting textures, I'll stay in this texture mode because the light's not really influencing the color that I'm seeing. Like this, it almost looks like the candles got, one, they got darker, obviously. But two, it looks like they maybe got a little bit more red. And that really didn't happen. So again, seeing the flats, this is going to be just closer to what you'd see with a texture in Photoshop. So let's get a brown color somewhere in there for the wood. And again, I could just select the polygons, switch to the paint tool, and fill this in. Again, just getting the base colors. And then let's just hide this paintbrush. Let's get gray, but let's do just a little hint of blue, purple in there. Somewhere about there. And we'll fill this in. And again, you're seeing as soon as I put pixels on here, like technically this is a PNG, so there's no pixels here, there's no paint information. As soon as I put that paint information, all the lighting information goes away at the same time. So again, we're seeing multiple things happen at once. So it could be a little bit confusing at first. And again, I'm using a tablet instead of a mouse on this. It just makes my life a lot easier. I also use a tablet for modeling because again, I'll do so much modeling and working on a computer in a day that using a mouse, my wrist starts to hurt. Pen just feels more natural. So now that we have these base colors in, we can start to worry about kind of secondary colors. So let's start with the rock. I'm going to go ahead and hide this wood. Or start with the rock, start with the stone. So normally what I do when I'm painting stuff like this, I'll usually just throw some base colors and just so you have kind of a feel for what's going on. And then I kind of do like a light color pass and a dark pass. So this one I'm just thinking, okay, where would the shadows be on this? And I switch to the airbrush so we have kind of soft paint. Then I'll also drop my opacity down and I'll use lighter brush strokes. So again, we're saying that in here is going to be a little bit darker. And if I want, I can hold Control and hit 1 and toggle the wireframe off, and then I'll see just the textures. Another trick that you can do, because I like to see the wireframe so I can kind of see what's going on with the geometry, I'm going to hit the O key. This is just a little menu. You can also bring it up by hitting this little gear right here. Either or works. And go to Active Mesh. And right here you have wireframe opacity. If I drop this down, let's drop it to 4. So now I can still see my wireframe. It's just really, really faint. So I can kind of do a better job of painting this. Yep, we missed a little section right here. So what I'm going to do is I just need to fill this color in. So if I actually hover over the color that I want, this guy right here, so we switch to the paintbrush, I'm going to middle mouse click. You'll see my color change. That's how you color pick in Moto's middle mouse click. Let's just make sure this entire thing is full. The other thing I could do would be jump into the UV tab. And another thing with the newer versions of Moto, and in my other videos, when I click on this, the image should show up over here, but sometimes it doesn't, which is a little bit confusing. So let's switch polygon mode, Control U, and unhide so we can see everything. So to make this visible, you go to Options, you go to Backdrop, and just hit Current Image Selection. So that used to be selected by default. It's not selected by default anymore. It's a little bit frustrating. But now I can see all my UVs. If I was to move these, I can see what's going on with all my textures now. I want to hit the Undo button because, again, I don't want to have to repaint any of this stuff. That would be horrible. So let's jump back into the paint tab. And the other thing, we have these tools here. I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but I can actually get back to my modeling tools by clicking on this little guy. Unwrapping tools are all right here. And then my paint tools is right here. It's like a little icon of a paintbrush. And again, there's some sculpting and other tools in here as well. But normally when I jump from tab to tab, like the modeling tab, it has me on the modeling one here, UV tab, UV buttons. Don't do topology. And then the painting one has me on the painting one. So again, these are in order up here. They correspond with the order up here. They try to lay things out pretty intelligently. I think they do a pretty good job. Just want to look in here. I just wanted to make sure that all the paint there was good. So let's jump back to our paintbrush and let's get that darker stone color that we had. So, I want the airbrush, not the paintbrush. And we have the lower opacity. There we go. And again, I'm using a tablet so I can have my pressure sensitivity and I can paint heavily or I can paint really lightly, and just taking advantage of that. So again, this is a process that, again, this part of the video I could technically speed up, but I just kind of want to walk you through some of these different techniques that we do. Because again, as you start painting this stuff, more and more things kind of pop up. So I have a lighter color. Is that it's a little bit too bright? So again, some students have an easier time with this because just they've done a lot of painting in their spare time in other classes. But some people they just haven't done a lot of painting, so it just doesn't really come natural to them. So this is just something that just expect your first handful of things you paint just to not be very good. But don't think of it as you need to make this thing amazing. Think of it as a stepping stone in increasing your skill of painting. There we go. So again, turn the wireframe off and just seeing how this looks. I mean, you saw the steps that I went through for this. It's just really, really easy, just making some highlights, making some shadows. And again, it's starting to look pretty good. Again, it's nowhere near amazing yet, but we're just kind of having fun with this. So again, I'm just painting these corners, getting them a little bit lighter, maybe hitting these corners. Let's actually drop the opacity. And again, I could either darken the color or just drop the opacity. Doesn't really matter. Well, I mean, if I want perfect colors and stuff, it technically would matter, but we're just trying to have fun here. So that's good. So ideally, I do this same process on the wood. So with this, I can middle mouse click to color pick. I'd want to switch to a darker color. And then I could say, oh, I'm going to make this area. I don't want to accidentally paint the stone there. So I can make the bottom portions of this a little bit darker. Make the top portion a little bit darker, because again, there's just going to be some shadow that's there. And the other thing you can do to kind of simulate a 3D look is actually grab two different sides of this. Airbrush, really light opacity. Just hit those. So now we kind of have, turn the wireframe off, a light side of the wood and a dark side of the wood. And that kind of happens all the way around. There's not actual lighting going on. But that's just something you can do to make it look a little bit kind of more 3D, you can think of it like. So I'm going to grab these ones, and instead of this color, let's hop it up to a little bit more of a yellow color. And again, we're at 20% opacity, really light brush stroke. Actually, that's coming in way too hot. So let's drop this down to 10% and do even lighter brush stroke. There we go. So we worked in a little bit of kind of yellow on this one. So from here, if I wanted to, let's get just a little bit different of a color and do a little test stroke. Okay. So wood is kind of a fun one to do. Again, I'm not going to paint this whole thing. I'll leave some of it up to you. But with wood, at least painted wood, you can kind of get away with, whoa, not 100% opacity. My bad. Let's do 10% opacity. Using this paintbrush, so we have really hard edges. And we're just going to do a couple strokes up and down. And again, what you really want to focus on is, I don't need like a perfectly straight line. Honestly, I don't want it wiggly, but I just want to make sure that I start all the way at the bottom and work my way up all the way to the top. Let's actually drop this to 5%. And this is going to start giving you kind of a look like there's like little striations in the wood. So again, as soon as I zoom out, this starts to feel more and more like wood, the kind of more that you doctor this up. And again, this is something that you can just do this process and then blend in. Like now I'm blending in a little bit more, like a more reddish brown. And again, we already established that this is the lighter side, this is the darker side. But you can see the colors that I'm bringing over top of this. I'm just doing the same dark brown color all the way around. And again, eventually, these two colors won't be as different from each other. Let's desaturate this, take it closer to red, and do a darker one more time. So then we can see we have all these natural little lines in here. And from here, what you can do, so I'm just going to color pick this, get it a little bit darker. Let's actually switch to the airbrush 20%, do a test stroke. Yeah, that should work. So now I can just, I don't know how well you can see this color-wise in the video, but right here, we're getting a little bit of a darker scenario. So again, you can just kind of play off the lines that get created just from you going up and down. And then you can start making knots in the wood and stuff. So again, we'll try to make this a little bit more contrasty, so it reads a little better. But saying that, it wasn't planned, it just kind of naturally happened like that. You can do another one right here. Kind of seeing another one right here. And these things just kind of like appear as you're making the wood. So again, other thing you can do is look at other hand-painted wood and just see things and styles that other people have used. Sometimes they'll go in and they'll make these little twisty things in them that are kind of fun to do. And this is just something you got to kind of experiment with and realistically just have fun with. So again, that's something that you can kind of spend infinite time on. Another thing that you can do, just trying to go through, give you guys some ideas for stuff, is I got a little bit darker of a color using a paintbrush instead of an airbrush. Let's actually turn our wireframe on so we can see stuff. I could actually come in here and start, let's make this quite a bit darker. We have a low opacity. Test stroke, and that should work. So from here, we can start making cracks. And then start doing highlights where the part of the rock would catch. Maybe put some moss in there. Maybe this is older, get some greens in there and whatnot. And again, you can kind of have fun with these cracks, make other little things where it's just get a darker color. Do kind of like a U shape. Get a little bit lighter of a color. Put that over the top so it just kind of feels like a bit of a dent in there. I know it's a rock. A rock really wouldn't dent, but you could even somehow turn that into a chip. Again, this is just something that you can kind of have fun with. Other thing, the blur tool and the smudge tool inside of Moto. Again, I usually don't paint in this for most of my work, but the smudge tool and the blur tool inside of Moto is, in my opinion, amazing. I haven't found a 3D painting software that does a better job than Moto with smudge and blur. So again, definitely take advantage of those. Maybe even try them out on the woods. The other thing, you can see this is kind of laggy. If you want to reduce the lag, what you can do is isolate your selection, because right now Modo kind of sees this whole texture as being visible. So just isolate this little part, grab our smudge tool, and then do it again. It's still a little bit laggy, but nowhere near as laggy as it was. So again, that's another thing you can try out. The other thing, I'm pretty sure the actual concept art actually had these things segmented off into little pieces. So it was something like this all the way around. And I could even come in here and make this side darker on all these. That'd probably be a good thing to do. Maybe do like that pseudo shadow right there. But regardless, say that these are kind of their own individual pieces. Like this was maybe like kind of chiseled stone, almost like a brick, where this was one piece that got kind of put. This was a piece, this was a piece. Maybe have some type of grout or just a gap in between there. Again, this is something you can definitely have fun with. So the candles, same thing. Our original version of it, we just had a little bit of a darker spot that kind of simulated where a wick would be, and then it was just kind of dirtied up a little bit, like some of the wax was maybe like had some burnt parts on it and whatnot. Middle mouse click to select that. Just come around and just brighten up the top of this candle. Again, that's a really easy thing that you can do, is just take the tops of things and make them lighter, and then take the bottoms of things and make them a little bit darker. It seems like a really easy thing, but again, most cases, you're actually going to, in any room that you're in, you're going to have a lot of lighting sources coming from above, if it's the sun, if it's, I don't know, chandeliers, normal lights, whatever. So doing that same thing and just getting up under this candle with a little bit darker colors, just as the base, before we go in and start detailing it. This is just that simple stuff that you can do that's just kind of no-brainer work, that from this compared to other empty candle, I mean, I really didn't do a lot. This guy is just a solid color. This guy, I'm kind of with the lighter on the top, it's actually kind of helping the form, so we can kind of see the shape of this better. So again, from here, I'll let you finish painting this. I definitely bring up the actual image of it and just kind of use that as a guide for how you want to paint. Again, this doesn't have to be a perfectly finished object. The only other thing that I'll mention is definitely jump over to the image tab. We have our Candelabra paint. Right click on this and hit save. Pretty much whenever you do a stroke, so we'll grab brush, do a stroke of orange on here, see a little asterisk appeared. So if I right click, let's move my right click. If I right click and save, that little asterisk is going to disappear. That means that our texture is up to date and it's saved. And just know that that texture is a separate file. So bringing up our reference, actually, I mean, you could have this up. This was one that was painted. You could go off of this for reference and color pick and whatnot. And again, let's make this a little bit bigger. Just see how the stone was done. We have little cracks in here. Things are separated. The wood's a little bit fun. There's scratches on the metal here. We have some color variation here. Again, this was done really, really quickly. I think the total time for this was like an hour and a half. It's pretty simple. Just want to go to my desktop. And right here is our texture. So again, when I right click and hit save, it is saving this image that's on my desktop. And I know I've mentioned this before, but just be really, really aware that this image doesn't save inside your 3D file. So when you hit File, Save as FBX, or File, Save as a Modo scene, this image isn't saved. It's just referencing it. So when you open up Modo, it's going to look for this image in the last location that it was. So if you didn't save it out or you deleted it, all that information's lost. And realistically, the majority of the time spent on this is going to be with the texture. So the other thing with that is we have this texture, but the unwrap goes together with the texture. They go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. So definitely do a File, Save as, and save out this 3D file. You don't want to lose it. And save out the texture. So again, have a folder, have the 3D file in the text in the excuse me, the 3D file and the texture in the same location. It's just going to make your life a lot easier and you won't have to go back and redo any work. So again, I'll let you finish this up. And then for your submission, turn in the 3D file. So file, save as, FBX. File, save as, choose FBX. I know we went through this a bunch of times. And then again, this guy, right click, save, or you could even do a save as and save it as a new image type. Again, I just say PNG is fine. And then make sure that you upload both of those files.